you. Appreciate that. Otherwise, you're fairly invisible to me as I'm looking for hands and so forth. So time is now 6:08. I'll call the meeting to order. We do as we always do out of respect, acknowledge that the lands on which we're gathering is the traditional territories of the Coast and the Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands and to our adjacent waters continues to this day. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Don't see any. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We have adoption of minutes. We can do all 6 of those together if people wish, and then pull. Moved and seconded. Is there any changes, corrections, additions? I do not see any hands popping up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you for that. We have Advisory Planning Commission's minutes just for receipt. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a comment about the Advisory Planning Commission. It's very nice to see the commentary in the actual minutes as opposed to just a summary results. So thank you very much to staff for making it available and understandable to not only myself, but also the public in terms of what happens at that commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Yeah, that's a change that took a while ago, and I think it's very helpful for people to understand some of those details. Don't see any other discussion, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Then we have Advisory Design Panel of March 1st for receipt. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We then have the Rise and Report from closed council meeting of March 14th. Just get move Rise and Report. Seconded. Thank you. Don't usually have discussion, but if there anything, no. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you for moving through those procedural pieces fairly expeditiously. I'm going to remind people if they wish to address council generally that on any of the open public portion of the meeting for items not on the agenda, that comes up next. So if you wish to call the 1-800 number, this is the 1-855 number. This is the time to do so. You would hit call 1-855 and hit *9 to raise your hand, and then I'll go to you at that public participation moment. I usually keep my mayor's remarks fairly short, but tonight I have a few things I just want to make sure that I cover off for the benefit of council and the public. I want to express my appreciation for the public and to staff for the very successful design fair that happened this weekend. It was held at Monterey Center. Turned out to be quite crowded because there were so many people who showed up. We had well over 100 people come through and provide detailed input. So thank you for everybody who attended, and that information will come back to us as we go through that infill housing discussion. We have a virtual version of that coming up tomorrow. I think that might be full at this point, but if not, feel free to sign up. I also want to remind people there is an online ballot for mail-in ballots. We're just trying to get a sense of how many people are interested in doing mail-in ballots, and during this year we expect it to be higher than usual, but it takes a lot of staff to manage those, so we're just trying to get a sense. So if people can fill that in online, that would be helpful. We have the Camas Day coming up on May 1st, which is just a community celebration up at Uplands Park. I had the pleasure of attending the inaugural JD-JID. It was the Joint Common Law and Indigenous Legal Orders Law degree from UVic. I got to sit at the table with Dr. John Burroughs, who was this was his brainchild 27 years ago to bring this forward, and it's been a work in progress. So this is the first graduating class ever, and in fact the first graduating class of Indigenous law anywhere in the world ever. So it's quite a monumental piece, and it was hosted by the Songhees at the Songhees Wellness Center, and very well attended, and obviously a very positive event. I also had an opportunity with 2 other mayors to meet with Minister Dix on the doctor shortage, and I think that's been in the news a fair bit. They are providing emergency funding, but there's obviously an enormous amount of work still to do. I did find there was, I think, a little bit of disconnect between the stress that the community is feeling and the sense from the ministry about where they're at in that. So I'm hoping that that gap can be closed in the relatively near future. Also, Destination Greater Victoria hosted an event with Tourism Oak Bay. Councillor Braithwaite was also able to attend. Councillor Green, I know you were unable to attend, but it was very well attended and a good celebration of the industry that's making its way back. I also had the opportunity of attending the UVic Celebration of Champions, which is for their athletes, and I mention it only because boy, what a lot of impressive young people there were. 3 of those people who were all representing national and provincial champions, 3 of them also had perfect 9.0 GPA grade point averages as they were managing also the incredibly high level athletics and traveling all over the country. So quite remarkable. And all of council attended the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities conference a weekend and a half ago. And that was very well attended and very, I think we all found it quite valuable and educational and informative. Also want to just thank our MLA Murray Rankin, who had the chance to talk to staff and to council a little bit about DRIPA, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which lays out 4 guiding principles and 89 specific goals for the province. They aren't specific to municipalities, but obviously we're trying to make sure that we're aligning our practices with those best practices from the province. And it's interesting having the opportunity, as I said earlier, to sit with some of the Indigenous law people who are guiding these pieces. The general feeling is that BC is probably a decade or more ahead of most of Canada, if not the world, on some of these areas. So it's interesting to be part in the middle of that and aligning with those goals. And last but absolutely not least, I told you this is longer than usual, but last but absolutely not least, as was made public today, council was selected our former, I guess still current, Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Selena Williams, as our new Chief Administrative Officer. That becomes effective on April the 19th. We're very, very pleased to be able to have the skill sets in-house to be able to promote and to see a seamless transition. And I guess it's the last meeting we'll have a chance to see you in person, Ms. Varela, although your last day isn't quite officially up yet. So with that, thank you for all your service here. I know that you'll do wonderful things up in Qualicum Beach, and really appreciate the assistance with the smooth transition here as we move it forward. So thank you for that. Next up, we have public comment and question period. This is up to 30 minutes, up to 3 minutes per speaker for people to speak to members of council on any items of interest to them. I see there's a couple of hands online. I will call on those 2 hands that are up. Once I go through we have, I believe, 3 people in person, and then I'll go to the 2 people online. And so we're just going to have staff bring them into the room, and we're still following some separation protocols here in the chambers to make this a little bit, make it feel safe for everybody with masks off. So welcome to our chambers. Hello, are you all together? No. Oh, okay. So I'll just a little bit of protocol here. Like I said, we have up to 3 minutes per person, and I'll gently pull it to a close if you go a little over, and we have a total of 30 minutes altogether. I just asked that if you just state your name and your municipality of residence to start with, and then I'll start the timer. You can start speaking, and if it's an item that's on the agenda later, we'll typically ask you to speak at that time, but hopefully looking forward. It's very nice to have some people back in the chambers again, so welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Rubin, and that's my husband, Keith Hutchinson. We are residents of Oak Bay. We've been here for 2.5 years, so we're newbies in such a wonderful community. We are going to be sponsoring a Ukrainian family who is, Victoria is her name, and her daughter's name is Anastasia. She's 11 years old. They managed to escape in the middle of the night in that war-torn country with a suitcase each, and have been to 4 countries trying to make their way up to Canada. I'm quite impressed with the ingenuity of everything they've done to get here, and we're really pleased to tell everybody that they're going to be arriving on Wednesday of this week. So we're pretty excited about that. We've got the little girl, Anastasia, organized to go to school. We're offering, Keith and I are offering short-term accommodation. We live in a little cottage house, but to us, a spare bedroom is 1 spare bedroom too many. and we'd like to give it to these people for some safety. They're very traumatized. I know you've all seen it and read it, but when you talk to somebody or FaceTime somebody on the phone and they start to cry and say they may never see their husband again, it's really very heartbreaking. So it's my understanding that Oak Bay owns 2 homes that they've used previously for refugees. And I'd really like to encourage council and you, Mr. Mayor, to do whatever is necessary to make sure that these women and children are protected and have longer-term housing. I know the community has done this before, and I'm sure they'll gather again and help everybody. The question I'm repeatedly asked, because we've set up some Facebook pages for fundraising and clothes and bus tickets and things like that, is what is council doing? And I have to say to them, I just don't know. I'm hoping that success at the end of tonight will look like something in your minutes that we read when they're available that say, you know, you're willing to help find a partner and to be a part of this human solution that we all need and is so needed. I spoke to Victoria, the mother, about a shared accommodation, a residence in one of these homes, if that's something that would work for them. And she said, absolutely, it would be really good, in part because there would be support for herself and her daughter so that they could, you know, team off of each other, look after each other's children, and speak a language that they're familiar with and find some soul hugging in that, if you will. I'm going to be remiss if I don't acknowledge the input of the federal government that they announced the other day in helping refugees on a short-term basis, but it is only short-term, and the problem that's facing everybody now is finding longer-term solution. I'm not saying long-term, I'm just saying longer-term. And also, Keith and I are going to be supporting and throwing a summer sort of lawn get-together with the refugees. I've been able to also place another refugee, in addition to the ones we're getting, who contacted me with another Oak Bay person. And so I would like to extend a welcome to all of council and you, Mr. Mayor, to attend this. We'll let you know. It'll give you an opportunity to meet some of the people that we've all been working so hard to help. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin and Mr. Hutchinson. Yeah, thank you for that. And certainly those, the use of those, once the lease expires, the current lease expires with Burke's, they've opted not to continue that. We hope to have some answers in terms of what the next steps are. So it's certainly, those houses are certainly important that they're used and that we find some positive use for it. So thank you for your comments here tonight.
Thank you.
I can invite the next speaker to come forward. And same process, just state your name and municipality of residence, and I'll start the stopwatch.
Hello, my name is Ann Piazza, and I live in Oak Bay. I've just got a few notes here, so I'm just going to read from them. Our family is excited to welcome a young Ukrainian family into our home. Dimitro, Lilia, and their 6-year-old daughter, Milana, recently fled Kiev and are very grateful to be coming to Canada. My husband and I will be hosting the family free of charge until they find employment and housing. As Dimitro and Lilia have already lined up job interviews in Victoria, it may not be too much longer until they have steady employment income. Their biggest challenge is finding rental accommodation. Not only is Victoria a very competitive and high-cost rental market, but landlords may be reluctant to rent to Ukrainian refugees as they will not be able to provide credit history, former landlord reference letters, or personal reference. What I propose is to open up the welcome homes for Ukrainian refugees and allow the families to live in the homes for a period of possibly 4 or 6 months. It might even be possible for 2 families to share one house. as Lynn has suggested. At the end of the rental term, the families could move into new rental accommodation, and perhaps the District of Oak Bay could issue a letter of reference that the families could give to a prospective landlord. That would be a huge help to them, I believe. I had to think about why Oak Bay would rent to Ukrainian refugees and not to a Canadian resident or family in need. And these are some things that I came up with. We really need to do whatever we can to help these families fleeing a brutal war. It's really the right thing to do. These families have an urgent need for housing, and they had to leave with few possessions and little cash. They have no family, friends, or advocates in Canada. And as mentioned previously, they need transitional housing due to, no credit history and no employment history. There's 4.5 approximately million Ukrainians that have fled their country and were taken in by neighboring countries such as Poland. We're only asking to house, for Oak Bay District, to house 5 people, and that, well, maybe 6, including your new one, but that includes 2 school-age children, as far as we know. And just to summarize, I feel very strongly that we need to do everything in our power to set these families up for success so that they can become self-reliant, contributing members of our society.
I'm going to ask you just to wrap it up as well. We're at the 3-minute mark.
We're up at the 3 minute?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Excellent. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
comments. Can I just say, express on our behalf, thank you. Thank you for sponsoring. Thank you for taking this initiative. We have 2 houses. We have some work to do on them. We have some to wrap up our current lease. There's things going on. I think you'll find a lot of support here for the initiative that you're bringing forward. But no matter what happens on our side of things, I just want to express my appreciation for the work that you're doing. It's very much appreciated. I think the whole world needs to step up and help. So every little bit that gets done is helpful, and you're doing a lot. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the folks online at this point. I have the person with the last 4 digits of 9907 on the Zoom call. If you could unmute yourself or turn on your video if you can, but certainly unmute yourself, and same process if you wish to address council, just give your name and municipality of residence. You are now unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. Thank you. And welcome.
Okay, good. My name is Anthony Mears. I live in South Oak Bay.
Welcome,
I
Mr.
just have a couple requests. Unfortunately, I was able to change my plans for Saturday regarding the Infill Design Fair. I'm sure a lot of other residents were in the same boat. So what I'd like is that the material, I've talked to a couple of people that have attended, and they said it's quite a lot of material that was provided. So if you could provide the print material showing the outcomes of the phase 1 and the pictures of the infill scale models that were provided, and also the walkabout maps. I think that was the other one that was provided. If you could provide that online, and I'm sure we have that electronic versions of those. That would help a lot for people to know what's going on. And my second request is, actually I've made 3 requests already for this, is that the Advisory Planning Commission agendas don't normally have the documents that are provided to the commission members. And this has been a long haul to try to get that provided to the people that are listening or attending those meetings. It's difficult. You sit there not knowing what's being discussed because you don't have the documents in front of you. And that sort of happened at the last meeting. And so if you could, and I also did not get a notification that the meeting was going to be, I normally get a heads up, but I didn't for this one. And I know my box was checked because I checked ahead of time. So if you could provide that information and also get the reports on that agenda, that would help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mears. The report should be on those agendas. That is standard practice. I will say, though, sometimes there are instances, like I believe last meeting, there was a presentation that was given that was just done live, and that was probably not visible to the people watching at home. So, but I can say that the materials that came from the, just want to make sure I get staff, I'm not speaking out of line here. I believe all of the materials that was presented is going up onto the oakbay.ca, oh sorry, connect.oakbay.ca/infill. Feedback should have that, those things posted there shortly. I'm not 100% sure. I'll come back to that.
All right,
yes. The answer is yes.
All right, thank you. But the design panel had the documents that were provided to the APC, but not the APC agenda didn't have that attached, but the design panel had it attached. So obviously it was provided to the members of the design panel.
Okay. I'll definitely have a look at that, Mr. Mears.
It's been hit or miss. It's not, it's not something that happens automatically. Sometimes they put it on, sometimes they don't. So it would be nice to have a standard practice, right?
Thank you, Mr. Mears. There is a standard practice, so if something's gone missing for some reason, we'll make sure we look back and address it to make sure that consistency is there. I have next Catherine, and you've unmuted yourself, so you know what's going on. Please, again, if you state your name and municipality of residence for the record, then you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Catherine Nickerson, and I'm a longtime resident of Oak Bay, almost 25 years now. And my comment today is regarding the motion related to the Quest project at 2326 Oak Bay Avenue that was denied by Oak Bay Council on March 14th, 2022. I believe that there was an error in the process, and therefore a general mayoral reconsideration is in order. As you know, and in accordance with the ADP terms of reference, the council liaison to the advisory design panel is responsible to relay the committee perspective on matters back to the council. However, the council liaison was not present in attendance at the February 1st, 2022 ADP meeting when the Quest project was presented by staff and the development team. Therefore, the council liaison was not present.
Right, Ms. Eckerson?
Yes?
I'm just gonna, just for a little bit of correction here, I may just have an answer procedurally on this one, but the, it's a bit of an awkward piece on the reconsideration piece, but just for the record as well, the role of the liaison, the minutes reflect the will of the body, so the liaison may provide some context for some of that, but they're not required. That's what the minutes are there to record the official record of that meeting, just for that record. Sorry, but Ms. Varela, you had something else to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just refer you to Council's procedure bylaw that states for certainty a person or organization must not speak to Council on any matter that involves an application, project, or other initiative that will be or has been dealt with through another process under this bylaw or another district bylaw. So we are on a little bit of dangerous territory here as far as the procedure bylaw goes, and an application that has already been considered by Council.
Thank you for that clarification. I knew it was certainly applications that were live we couldn't have any comments on. Ms. Eckerson, I did receive an email, I believe, from you on the same matter, and I'm happy to respond to that offline. But perhaps we can, just given that part of the procedures bylaw, my apologies, but we probably should keep the context of that a little bit away from the application, although we've already recorded your comments at this point.
Well, thank you for that. I do have some questions regarding then the role and responsibility of the council liaison, because as I've mentioned, in accordance with the terms of reference, it says, quote, to relay the committee perspective on matters back to council. I believe that that is referencing a more fulsome kind of feedback than just the output or the final decision of the advisory design panel.
So, Ms. Eckerson, just because we have some limits on time and our procedures bylaw on a specific situation, perhaps we could reach out to tomorrow and just we could have a discussion with staff in terms of what the procedural parts of that are. It's a little bit of an awkward forum here to kind of get into that level of detail.
Okay,
Would that
well,
be accessible?
thank you. I would appreciate that follow-up.
Okay, let's manage that then. Thank you, Ms. Eckerson. I'm going to make a call. Is there anybody else who wishes to address council on matters of interest? We have, we actually went through a fair bit of time this meeting on this one. We do have some time left if anybody wishes to address us. And I'm going to call us just a second time if anybody who's online wishes to, if you're called into the 1855 number and you're trying to get our attention, you would hit *9. That is the star, not the ampersand, or not the pound sign, but the star sign, *9. If you wish to raise your hand, and I'll ask one last time, anybody who wishes to address council in the open portion of the meeting. I don't see any other hands popping up, so I will we'll come back to this table and move on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is reports and memorandums. As I tend to do, I try and just remind people about where there is public input and where there is not. The next 3 items do not have public input, but the items after that do. And I do anticipate that we will be getting through some of these items quickly and some not so quickly. But as we go through, if you wish to address council and you wish to call in, I would advise you to call into the 1855 number at this time and just wait. And when the item comes forward that you wish to speak to, if you wish to speak, hit *9 to raise your hand so we can see that and get to you and your comments before getting to the final debate. So number 8.1, we have the Oak Bay Recreation Center arena roof replacement. Mr. Herman, you're here with a report on the bid response.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. First, are you able to hear me okay?
We are, Mr. Herman, and for those who are watching or listening, just a heads up that Mr. Herman is our Director of Park, Recreation, and Culture. So yes, we can hear you, Mr. Herman. Just speak up a little bit would be helpful.
Okay, I will. Thank you. The replacement of the roof over the arena, the lounge, and the indoor sports field is a project that's been approved within the 5-year financial plan. Originally approved at a budget of $1.45 million. Recently, we undertook a tendering process to complete the work. That closed on March the 17th. 4 submissions were received. Unfortunately, all of those submissions were over budget, well over budget. For these large roofing projects, we do procure the services of a roofing consultant to provide us with guidance and expertise through the process. And we had, in fact, had discussions with the consultant in the fall to ensure that the budget was still a good budget number. And at that time, it was thought that it was. However, recent conditions in the market led to these bids all being over budget. Roofing materials, for one, include oil byproducts, and prices have risen substantially recently, as people who are watching the news would be aware. And labor rates have also increased fairly substantially as companies try to ensure that they have enough staffing to continue their business. So we did have a discussion in preparation for this meeting and recommendations that would be brought forth to council about whether delay of a year would be something that should be considered, but the consultant felt that there was no foreseeable change to those market conditions. So if we were to wait a year, that might not change the financial picture substantially. And the roof is at the end of its useful life, and it's anybody's guess as to whether it could last another year, another 3 years, another 5 years, but once they get to the end of their useful life, you're taking a little bit of a gamble. So the recommendation here is to approve award of the work to the low bidder, which is Universal Sheet Metal, in the amount that's shown, and that council approves an additional funding of $559,440 to come from the Infrastructure Renewal Reserve. That funding source was identified by the Director of Financial Services, and that the Director of Financial Services be directed to amend the financial plan if necessary. So with that, I can certainly answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. Are there questions of Mr. Herman or Mr. Payne on this matter? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Herman. Mr. Herman, thank you for this report and the explanation of the significant cost increase, which I'm sure was quite disconcerting to you in seeing it. I'm just wondering, there's a number of other projects related to the recreation center that are in the financial plan. Would the increase here change any of the intent to go forward with any of those other initiatives, or are they still going to be carried out as in the financial plan?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think certainly roofing projects that are in the financial plan, I think there's a couple. We'll certainly be reviewing those cost estimates with consultants to ensure that the numbers that are in the plan are valid, and the results here would suggest they're probably not, so that needs to be revisited. There's nothing in the short term, certainly no projects this year that we're concerned about holding off on. And quite honestly, we're looking to get this one going and then turn our attention to what's on the docket in the next 4 years of the financial plan, and just make sure that the numbers that we've put in front of council continue to be credible.
Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Herman, thank you for that information. And Mr. Herman, you did talk about adjustments that may be made to the financial plan. Perhaps this question is more for the Director of Finances, but what would that involve? How would it change the plan?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Payne, I believe you're online.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thank you for the question, Councillor Patterson. As mentioned by the Director of Parks, Rec and Culture, typically for some of the larger projects, prior to budget deliberations, we check in with the consultants and those that provided estimates to ask if a refresh is needed. That was done this year as well, and at the time that the budget was thought to be good. And we're seeing the volatility in the market, which has resulted in some of the increases. So we would go through that exercise again with some of the larger things coming up in our budget. We would be doing that naturally anyways, and just hope that the timing isn't aligned with more volatility when that happens. So in terms of this year's budget, I don't anticipate a lot of change outside of this one, but certainly it's a red flag for us to consider the larger picture and all the other large capital infrastructure projects in the budget.
Mr. Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no further questions, and I will support the recommendation as presented whenever a motion is due.
Thank you. I have Councillor Zelka with questions. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to staff. And first of all, I had a similar question to Councillor Patterson. Thank you for your eloquence on saying it. I wouldn't have said it quite as clearly as you did. So thank you for that in terms of the knock-on effects. But I do wanted to ask, with the work being done in May and July of this year, assuming that that's still accurate, what will the impact be on the services to the public, please?
Mr. Herman?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have an extended shutdown in the arena this year from late May to early July. That's about twice the length that we would usually experience. So certainly the majority of the work is expected to take place during that time. That being said, as we experienced with the pool, the work can be done without any impact to what's going on below within the facility. We're just replacing the top level there. So there should be no impact to any operations within the building other than, mobilization of equipment and cranes to get materials up onto the roof. There may be times where some traffic spots are taken up by equipment or things like that. But as far as what's going on within the building, we should be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. A quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
With respect to the roof, I understand that there are possible solar panels or water preheat pipes that are up there. Are they impacted by this, or is this something that will be installed after the fact? I just was wondering, how does this tie in with our incredible energy management program that's been going on for a number of years?
Mr. Herman?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's none of this work will tie into any of that work. The energy loop that's up there is relatively new. The solar panels that are up there are old. We are working on getting costs and what have you to update those, but we're not ready to present that to council yet. But as far as the work to do the roof replacement, there was a mandatory on-site meeting. All the folks, all the companies that submitted bids were in attendance at that meeting, and they walked the site, and they were aware of everything that's up there and what they needed to work around. So we're comfortable that there will be no additional costs or anything in that regard, but there is no tie-in per se to any of that equipment.
Thank you. No further questions. I'll be supporting the motion.
We don't have a motion on the floor at this point, but so
the recommended motion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. My question is a little bit theoretical, and I realize it's very late in the day with this particular project to contemplate it here, but I'm just curious, and I don't want to put staff on the spot. I'm just curious, just given this is a pretty significant overrun, and with significant, of the scale that it's going to have significant impacts to the budget, and as already been discussed, may actually prompt revisiting the budget. What I'm curious about is a project of this nature when associated with a parks and recreation facility is a potential way forward sometimes when these really large capital projects are done. Can these sometimes be funded through potentially an additional levy on user fees, or something that, a temporary or short-term, multi-year small levy on user fees to help offset the costs of something like that? I'm not saying that that's necessarily appropriate in this particular case, but I'm just wondering whether that's a mechanism that can be used for very large capital projects associated with recreation facilities, given that they collect user fees.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Herman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly that's not something that I've seen in my travels, but I don't really know the answer in terms of legislatively or logistically, whether that's an option and how it would work. I'm not sure if perhaps Mr. Payne has better information than I do for you, but that would be something that I would need to do some digging on if nobody else is aware of the answer.
If there's no definite answer right now, I'd rather not guess, so we'll perhaps leave it for the moment. And it's an interesting question in terms of how we're always looking at allocating costs appropriately. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. And Councillor Patterson had asked if how this overrun will affect other things that are in the financial plan. And on going on that, and I guess this question is for Mr. Payne, is that, you know, with the 30% increase in cost for the roof, the other items that are in the financial plan, I'm assuming that they're going to have some sort of an increase as well. And so then how does that affect, continue to affect the budget? I mean, I understand that the $500,000 is not going to really affect the items that are in there right now, but those items will have a cost overrun as well. So how does that then get taken into effect? And yeah, it's a kind of a rhetorical question, but yeah.
I'm going to make it a non-rhetorical question and go reach out to Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne, it's a good question in terms of how we're managing our finances in the long run. Are these changes, these sort of inflationary impacts, captured in the inflationary changes to the increases to the capital reserves, or are they managed more incrementally on a year-over-year basis in some other mechanism?
Your Worship, so it's a really good question, and to just sort of demonstrate, I think the point here is that, you know, the increase cost related to this project, essentially on a life cycle cost basis, is an extra $30,000 a year, and that's, you know, 1/10 of a percent increase in taxes. So if you see similar unit rate increases across all of our other infrastructure, you know, in the long term, it results in increased taxes or increased recreational levies, to Councillor Appleton's point. And so now, how do we deal with that in reality? Right now, as Council's aware, we're really phasing up our sustainable infrastructure funding, right? So we haven't reached the annual infrastructure sustainable amount yet. And the pace at which we are closing that gap exceeds what the market increase is on all our unit rates. When we achieve sustainable infrastructure, or what staff believe is around the annual sustainable amount that we should be setting aside, annually we need to revisit those amounts to ensure that they've kept up with inflation or cost escalation. So, you know, this year the cost escalation is significant because of the unique factors. But supposing on a regular year, the cost of construction is up an extra 3%, well, then the contributions that we're making to our infrastructure reserves should go up by that amount. It's just a forced growth factor. And keep in mind, you know, when I say a 3% increase to our infrastructure reserve funding, that doesn't mean that's a 3% tax increase, because our infrastructure funding is only a portion of our overall taxes. But that's the mechanism, that's the policy best practice when we reach those sustainable levels, and we're not there. So right now we're just increasing at a fast pace, and that's really a good strategy at this point.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So I'm prepared to join the motion all at once, or do you want to move receipt first, or?
Move receipt first.
I'll move receipt of the.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? Go ahead.
And then I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Herman and Mr. Payne. I think I always look at things like this as good case studies for managing our finances and capital projects, and appreciate that you bringing this forward in this way. We have up next number 8.2, the Bay Coolkit Program. I believe we have Mr. Hyde-Lay, or is it Mr. Herman again, to introduce this item?
Your Worship, I can introduce the topic, and certainly Mr. Hyde-Lay is here and has been a little bit more boots on the ground and dealing with UBC on this. So any questions he could certainly help to answer as well. But to get started, I can introduce the topic. The Coolkit, Oak Bay Coolkit Program came from a recommendation of the Community Climate Action Working Group, and is a strategic initiative of the 2019 to 2022 Council Strategic Priority Plan. It's a 3-year community engagement and climate action initiative. It's meant to run for the next 3 years, 2021 to 2024 with a total approved budget over that timeline of $121,700. It is a joint initiative with the District of Oak Bay and the Collaborative for Advanced Landscape Program at UBC and the Forestry Department. And before you tonight is a copy of the governance review document, as well as the communications and engagement plan, both for year one of the 3-year initiative. And should council endorse those documents, we will begin work on that engagement plan and marketing work immediately in preparation for the first public workshop that is meant to take place, as noted in these documents, on May the 14th. So given that, we will endeavor to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. Are there any questions of staff on this matter? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton, and then Councillor Ney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just my sincere thanks to staff for bringing this forward. I know that the community's anxious to get started and anxious to sink their teeth into this after being stuck in COVID for the last couple of years. So they are chomping at the bit to get started. So I appreciate staff taking this away and presenting this in such a usable format. I just wanted to ask one question, and this may be actually more for Mr. Payne, but just in the governance review document, it's talking about elements which are out of scope, and the second point under out of scope, things which are not covered by this is the funding to support individual and neighborhood identified climate actions. And we have discussed around the council table before the interest in starting there is already a budget line item assigned for community grants for climate action, and as we've discussed before, the infrastructure is not really in place to award or sort of roll those things out due to limited capacity, as I understand it, and I totally get that. I'm just wondering whether an update might be available on whether or not that granting program might be feasible within the scope of this, within this first year of the Coolkit program, and whether or not we might address that out of scope, whether we might be able to offer an opportunity to put that in scope by offering those grants to Coolkit participants.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Herman, I'll probably give it to you first, and if you want to hand it off to Mr. Payne, feel free.
Yes, Your Worship, I think I don't know the answer to that question, so we'll see if Mr. Payne can provide some insight.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you. Mr. Payne, 2 different items, but can you give us any update on the feasibility of using some of those funds?
Yes, Your Worship. I haven't been involved in the design of the programs as of late. So I'm afraid I'm not able to answer in terms of how much progress has been made on designing the programs. Perhaps that would be a good question for Ms. Varela. The funds are available. I know that there's ongoing operating funds for those rebate programs available. In my mind, it's a matter of the program being designed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. Because of the tight timeline for 2022, staff did contemplate connecting the 2 projects. Certainly, we can bring that forward for further council decision-making for year 2 and 3, and again, these are great pilot projects as we launch them. So it's exciting to see the traction just gained on the Coolkit for this year, with the end of June looming, which is one of UBC's deadlines. And then we can look at augmenting that by connecting it with additional grant streams in future years.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and I appreciate Ms. Varela's comments. I'm just wondering whether at this stage of the game, is there the need for council direction to have further information come back from staff at a juncture that makes sense to talk about options for implementation? It had sort of sat, I guess I was just curious because it had kind of sat as a bit of a joint project between community building and planning and finance, and there's obviously been capacity issues throughout. So I'm just wondering whether there was the need for direction, or whether staff were already contemplating a decision point for that coming up.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Ms. Varela, and perhaps and I can't recall in this in this report, what there is in the way of, reports back, because that would be an obvious inflection point if there was something coming back that identified some areas that could get good value from grants, that we would have the chance at that point to look at it. But Ms. Vrella?
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, with the pilot project this year and seeing the opportunity for what Coolkit participants come up with ideas, that will start to feed that potential grant program. So I think these are the steps that could inform that in future years.
Thank you, Ms. Vrella. Satisfactory? All right. Any other questions of staff at this point? Sorry, Councillor Nay, I have you written down. I just
No, that's
looking
fine.
this way.
Yeah, no, good. Good to see this come forward. Thank you very much to staff and for the layout here with the engagement plan, the governance review. So I just was, it does look like an awfully, I know there's a lot of readiness in the climate, or in the community, should I say, and I'm looking at these timelines right now, and we just have to work with what we've got. But from what I see here, we've got, and I don't want to micromanage this, but I do have a question regarding these very tight timelines, is 3 workshops over the next 6 weeks, and then there's a summertime, July, August implementation, and then an evaluation, it looks like, starting in September. It's very, very tight, and one of the questions I have is around recruitment of, I think you're doing a train the trainer type model. So recruiting people to the workshop, it's tight. One of the stakeholder groups, I'm wondering how realistic it is to consider including them, and that is the student stakeholders. I did notice somewhere in the document it spoke that would have been a target, but given it's, we're looking at June when school is out, what I'm just wondering if maybe staff could comment on how they see that working. Is that a realistic stakeholder group at this point? Maybe it's more realistic in the 2nd, 3rd year.
Ms. Vrella, it looks like your finger's lingering over the button, so I'll go to you first.
There's sort of 2 points in there. Thank you, Your Worship. So the timeline as proposed is tied to UBCM's academic calendar. So that's why you're seeing that compression of the workshops through June. And certainly Council and UBC may decide to expand those stakeholder groups going forward. And this year's really focused on those individual participants. Perhaps Mr. Hidley, who's on the line, would like to add a bit more to that, but this year, again, it's focused on those individual participants, and then we can look at how Council could expand that, identify additional stakeholder groups, moving forward into future years if you expand the program.
Thank you, Ms. Vrella. Mr. Hidley, did you have anything you wish to add? And for those watching, Mr. Hidley is our manager of parks. So there we go, a bit of context. Mr. Hidley, you're muted at the moment. Mr. Hidley, you're showing on my screen, but you are showing as muted. So I don't have the, there we go. You're now unmuted.
That's because I am. Can you hear me now, Your Worship?
We can hear you now. Yes, welcome, Mr. Hidley.
That's great. Thanks for the question, Councillor Nate. I can see how you can see the timelines are tight, but we're going to try to select. Well, the selection process will essentially be made by staff and through CALIP, which is the Collaborative for Landscape Planning. We'll try to be as transparent as possible, and with designing a kind of a qualitative ranking for all of the applicants. So what we're really looking for is just a really good cross-section of climate champions. So the word is going to go out to all of the various people that we think would be interested, which would include, the hubs, the high school, faith-based groups, community associations. So we just aren't 100% sure what we're going to capture there, but once we do, we're going to go through kind of a ranking process and get the toolkit rolling.
Thank you very much, and good luck with the project. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Councillor Nay.
I have a hand up from Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka, then I'll maybe go to seek a motion.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, Chair. Just a sincere thanks to staff for pulling this together, and also that Parks and Rec working with Public Works. I understand with the organics curbside collection that will help facilitate some aspects here. So it's great to see that all aspects of Oak Bay's organizations are working towards helping out with climate change. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move receipt of the staff report.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on receipt? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would move the staff recommendations that the Coolkit version 1.0 be endorsed and that the communications and engagement plan be endorsed.
Seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I don't see any. I'm just going to throw an extra comment in here before we go to the vote, and that is just that I echo Councillor Nay's comment, and I think we've had this discussion a few times now about the pent-up demand for people wanting to do something and wanting to help others do something and wanting to spread the word. So I appreciate the pilot nature of this year, and certainly with COVID, that's probably we don't know what's going to happen. That's not inappropriate, but I would hope that we get to a much wider, broader, larger grouping near future, because I certainly hear from people all the time looking for participation and seeing traction. So thank you for all the work that's gone into this. I don't see any other hands up. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Moving on to section 8.3, which is the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association budget. Ms. Leary, you're in our room here with us, so perhaps I can invite you up to the microphone if you. We have the budget in front of us. I'm going to just invite Mr. Payne to give a quick overview, and then if you want to add any comments, you're welcome to do so, and we'll take questions. Mr. Payne, welcome to the meeting, or welcome back into the meeting. Perhaps you can give us a quick overview of this budget.
Thank you, Your Worship. The district has established a business improvement area by virtue of its Oak Bay Business Improvement Area Bylaw in 2020. That bylaw permits council to provide a grant to the BIA on an annual basis, so long as council approves the BIA's budget. So the budget's before council for approval this year. The BIA is permitted under that bylaw to request up to $500,000. This year they've requested $100,000, which is consistent with the previous year's request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. We have questions. Go ahead, Councillor Green. I will, before I get the motion, I'm just going to go to Ms. Leary, who's sat here for a little bit, just under an hour to address us. So if there's anything you wish to add, and we certainly see the long list of events that you're planning for this year. Welcome to the meeting, Ms. Leary.
Thank you. I just, on behalf of the BIA, want to express how excited we are to be returning to our roster of events, and we've certainly heard from the community. There's a great deal of excitement and pent-up demand for us to be returning to those. So we will be doing our best to execute them. As everyone's discussing, costs are escalating rapidly, so we've done our best to forecast as well as get commitments from our suppliers so that we can present an accurate budget and have a very successful year.
Very good, thank you. Is there any questions before we get to a motion? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the list of events. I'm really excited. I see the Spring Nosh is on there, which is awesome. I was looking at the Oak Bay Village night markets, and it looks like I went through my calendar, and it looks like one's on a Friday and all the rest are on a Sunday. Is that correct, or?
No, they should all be the second Wednesday of the month.
Okay, so on here, it shows the first one as being June 10th, which is a Friday.
So it should be the 8th.
Sorry?
It should be June 8th, sorry.
Oh, it should be June.
That's
okay.
my error.
Sorry, I just want to make sure because I know that sometimes, and you said it's the second Wednesday of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just also wanting to make sure that we don't have music in the park on the same nights as we have the market. Yes. So if we could get the correct dates, that would be awesome because we can hand those off to Parks, Rec and Culture. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to it.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
And thank you very much for the report, and thank you, Mr. Payne, for your help, as always, every year with the BIA grant request. And so I'm very happy to move the first recommendation, staff recommendation, which is to receive the report.
Moved and seconded for receipt. Any discussion on receipt? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, not opposed, go ahead.
And the second recommendation, that the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association budget be approved by council.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Just a quick comment to echo Councillor Braithwaite's comments. We really appreciate what the BIA is doing for our local economy and for our local community, and it is exciting to see some of the old events back, and I shouldn't say old events, but I mean they're exciting events. It has been a long 2 years for you and your association, I know that, and we really appreciate all the effort you've made to cope under very difficult circumstances. So thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. And the business community appreciates the great working relationship we have with the community and with council.
Thank you, Ms. Leary, and yeah, I'll reflect what Councillor Green said very quickly, which is that, it's been a very tough year or 2 years for businesses, and just the fact that you're willing to and able to so fundamentally return all of these events, really to the benefit of the mental health and community building of the community as a whole, is exceptionally appreciated, and we too appreciate the collegial approach to these things that the BIA does undertake. So thank you for that. Don't see any other hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. The budget is approved. Thank you very much, Ms. Leary. Have a great evening. For those at home, we were laughing because she said, I better get to work. So section number 9 is open to public participation. So if people wish to address council on items either 9.1, 9.2, or 9.3, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, call the 1-855 number and be ready to hit *9 when we get to those items. As it is, we probably will move through at least one or two of these reasonably quickly, and we don't want to not have people have the opportunity to speak. If you're on the Zoom call, you can hit the reactions tab and raise your hand, or if for some reason you can't get that to work, you can just turn on your video and wave frantically, and I'll make sure I get over to you on that platform as well. But if you call the 1-855 number again, you can hit the *9. That is *9, not #9, to raise your hand, and I will see it here to address council. So first up on the agenda, item number 9.1. If you wish to speak to us, please hit *9 at this point, and I'll call on you when we get to that moment. This is the Reserves and Surplus Policy Amendment. Mr. Payne, perhaps you can give us a quick overview of this item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Late in 2021, the staff brought forward recommended amendments to our reserve and surplus policy. These amendments were to place some parameters around the use of our major crimes reserve. At the time, council asked for some clarification on the what was meant by extraordinary costs in the policy. So staff have come back with that information. There's a memo attached to the report written by the Deputy Chief of Police, which provides an explanation. So staff are recommending that council adopt the amended policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Payne, any questions of staff on this one? I don't see hands popping up, so perhaps a motion to receive first, moved and seconded. Thank you for receipt. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? I'm just going to give a second here to double check to make sure we don't have any members of the public calling in to address us on this agenda item. I don't anticipate a huge wall of callers on this item, but just give it a second before I take the motion to approve the policy. Okay, so I get a motion to approve the policy. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Don't see any. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank our Director of Finances and the Chief of Police for working on this. I was one that did ask about the extraordinary costs and what they are, so I appreciate the additions to the policy. I think it also is a good indicator of all of the things that our police service may be involved in too. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I can share that it was a topic of discussion at the police board level as well, just for the clarity of understanding. So the approach of clarity was endorsed all around. So thank you. Any other discussion? Motion is live to change the policy. Don't see any other discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Moving on to item number 9.2, same process for the members of the public. If you wish to address council, please hit *9 at this time. That is *9 on the 855 number to raise your hand. Before we get to questions, we will go to Mr. Weber on the updated sidewalk and parking stall patio street occupancy permit. Mr. Weber?
Yes, thank you, Worship, and good evening. In response to the provincial government implementing restrictions on dining in restaurants, bars, and pubs in 2020 as a result of the emerging COVID-19 pandemic, Council directed staff to temporarily use street occupancy permits as a means for affected businesses in Oak Bay to expand their service areas by creating outdoor patios on portions of public sidewalks and parking stalls in front of their businesses. This strategy provided the district with a relatively quick and easy means by which businesses could receive approval, construct, and utilize outdoor patios that impacts from the provincial restrictions to them, their employees, and the patrons they serve would be minimized. The province later implemented the Temporary Expanded Service Area Authorization, or TESA, to temporarily allow businesses serving alcohol to expand their service areas into the newly created patio spaces. The TESA authorization was initially set to expire on June 1st, 2022, and in line with this authorization, Council directed staff to continue using the newly created practices and guidelines to regulate the sidewalks and parking stall patios until this date. With there being indication for business owners and members of the public that the outdoor patios are being generally well received, but there may still be some outlying issues that remain to be addressed, Council directed staff to develop a permanent process to regulate parking stall patios and sidewalks, through which broader community consultation and feedback could be considered. At this meeting, district staff are requesting authorization from Council to extend the current practices and guidelines used to regulate temporary sidewalk and parking stall patios until March 31st, 2023, to allow staff time to develop a permanent process to regulate sidewalk and parking stall patios. Council will note that in the initial report to Council on this meeting agenda, it was recommended that Council extend the current practices and guidelines until October 31st, 2022, and that Council advocate for the province to extend the TESA authorization. After this initial report was published on the agenda, the province introduced a new policy extending the TESA authorization until March 31st, 2023, and in turn, staff provided Council with an addendum to the initial report with a revised recommendation to simply extend the district's current practice and guidelines used to regulate temporary sidewalk and parking stall patios until March 31st, 2023, in line with the province's TESA extension. Staff feel that this would allow sufficient time to develop and implement a permanent process to regulate sidewalk and parking stall patios in Oak Bay. And with that, I welcome any questions from Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. Are there any questions of Council on this matter? Everybody seems to be pretty clear, I think.
Can we make a motion?
Yeah, let's do receipt first.
I'll move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on receipt? All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? Yes, I'll go to the public before I call the question. I don't see any hands that have been raised on my screen, so I'll go to staff and see if there's anybody from the public who has indicated they wish to speak. I don't believe there is. Not seeing any members of the public wishing to speak, I'll go back to this table.
Then I'll make the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded to extend to next March. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for bringing this forward. I think this is, I think the community will really be happy about this, and so will the businesses. It'll really help them to be able to continue to have the sidewalk patios. So I'm really looking forward to hoping that this motion passes.
Thank you. I don't see any other discussion. I would just compliment. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Much appreciate that. So question, just I guess two questions. One is the extension to 2023 to allow staff to come up with a process to extend that even further come the time of this expiry. Let me just start with that first question through you to staff.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Weber?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. No, it is more so to allow staff time to begin engaging a consultant to develop and actually implement a new regulatory process to regulate these parking stall patios. So we're hoping that it will actually be in place and operating by that date.
Excellent. Thank you. And a follow-up question, if I may, through you to staff. Temporary use permits, a nice general purpose tool in a toolkit is something we don't have, but possibly could be pressed into service here. Is it possible you could comment as to whether that might be conceivable for us to maybe kill two birds with one stone and do one to achieve both?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Just Mr. Weber, you can answer the question, but I think we have to also be cognizant that I believe our temporary use permits are not allowed under our current OCP, and so it require an OCP change, which requires this pretty significant public engagement process attached to it, which this does not. But Mr. Weber?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you sharing that information, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no options are really being ruled out at this point, and we're fairly early in the development of this project. So of course, we haven't made any specific decisions as to what will be the best option to legalize and regulate these outdoor patios, but certainly all options will be explored, and I can imagine temporary use permits will be explored as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate staff. Amazing timing on this, to time it just perfectly for the report to come at the same time as the province updated it, and we were able to not have to do this twice. So thank you. Any other discussion? I don't see any. The motion's live. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. And same rigmarole for the next one. It's got to be quick because I think this is just a dealing. So if anybody wishes to address us from the public, please hit *9 at this point to address. I will give this over to. Actually, I'm not sure who I would hand this over to give a quick introduction. This is just our own recommendation from Committee of the Whole back to this table in terms of these changes. I'm not sure if it really needs any introduction at this point. Ms. Morden, do you want to provide any update, or are you satisfied to leave it as a table and take questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think it's just a straightforward recommendation to come forward from Committee of the Whole, but certainly if there's any questions, I can help, and I believe Mr. Meikle is on the line as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. I will point out, just for those wondering, this has been caught because it's the way our procedure bylaw works. This does come back here. We're going to look at some options of changing this to allow recommendations from Committee of the Whole where there is public input to come to a section of the council meeting where we don't have public input, because I think especially this hybrid model, it makes it a bit awkward to have these timings. Go ahead, Councillor Green. Oh, Councillor Braithwaite, and then Councillor Green.
Oh, I was just going to make the recommendation.
Okay, moved and seconded for the recommendation. Before we get too far into the debate, I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity for the public to speak, because we do have that requirement. Has anybody indicated they wish to speak? I don't see anybody on my screen. No, not seeing any. Okay. Yep, I'll go to all members of council here in a second. I just want to give the public a chance at the beginning. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks through to you to staff for bringing this forward. Now that we have this, and hopefully it'll pass today, when can we see our Parks, Rec, and Culture Committee be seated at a table ready to assist our wonderful Parks, Rec, and Culture organization?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Meikle, you spoke to the timeline last time, but I can't remember what you said, so perhaps you can just give us an update on the expected commencement of this committee. I know we have to advertise, et cetera, as well. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Just to confirm, you can hear me all right?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the plan is to advertise for recruitment within this next month, and I think we'd be aiming for, once people are in place and training is complete, to actually have the committee start meeting early in the fall. But I may turn to and ask Ms. Morden for some further clarification there. Thank you.
Ms. Morden?
Thank you. I would agree with that timeline.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you, and we look forward to having that up and running. Item number 10, section number 10 on under bylaws and permits. I know we have Mr. Schenk on the call. I saw him earlier on the Zoom call. I'm going to go turn this over to Mr. Weber to do an introduction for this upland siting and design. Welcome back to the meeting, Mr. Weber.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. The District of Oak Bay is in receipt of an upland site design application to construct a new single-family home on the property located at 3275 Ripon Road. Staff reviewed the proposal in context with applicable official community plan policies, district bylaws, and the upland design guidelines, and consider the proposal to be supportable and ready for council consideration. The subject property is located on the east side of Ripon Road between Midland Road and Norfolk Road, is approximately 2,319 meters squared in area, surrounded by single-family homes on all sides, and has an RS2 one-family residential use zoning designation and Uplands OCP designation. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing single-family home on the property, construct a new one-story single-family home with a basement, as well as a outdoor in-ground swimming pool and patio surround, a new pool house accessory building, a new rock wall along the front property line, and a new paver driveway, and install new landscaping throughout the property. No variances are being requested as part of the proposal, and 19 bylaw protected trees are proposed to remove to accommodate the new home, and 21 new trees planted, resulting in an estimated 47% canopy coverage, meeting the target for the zone required by the tree protection bylaw. The application was reviewed at the March 1st, 2022 Advisory Design Panel meeting, and panel members expressed concern that the project takes away from the nature and does not promote the residential park setting as stipulated in the guidelines, citing the proposed removal of the number of trees, the extensive use of impermeable paving materials on the property, and the lack of plans for managing water runoff in a sustainable manner, and lack of integration of the home with the existing site. They ultimately recommended that council deny the application as presented. Following review by the advisory design panel, the applicant made several revisions to proposal, including narrowing portions of the proposed driveway in the front yard, changing the surfacing material of the driveway from asphalt to permeable pavers, and adding permeable pavers to a portion of the proposed pool surround, adding a rain garden to the northeast property corner to manage runoff, and replacing portions of the roof that were proposed to be clad in copper with dark toned asphalt shingles and metal roofing to match the roofing on the rest of the residence. As the subject property is within an area designated as the uplands within the district's official community plan, staff further reviewed the proposal for conformance with applicable official community plan policies and the uplands design guidelines, and determined that the proposal is largely in keeping with the policies and guidelines, with the exception of Uplands Policy H22, which encourages siting new development to retain as many mature trees as possible, and landscaping uplands design guideline, and 8 landscaping uplands design guideline, which encourages the preservation of significant healthy trees and plant material. However, staff note that the health of some of the proposed trees for removal is fair to poor, while others are not of significant size or species, or are deemed necessary for removal to allow adjacent trees and proposed plantings to healthily mature. Park Services additionally supports the removal of these trees with the exception of Gary Oak number 217, and have requested that information be included within a revised tree management plan submitted by the applicant, which identifies and includes measures to protect a pin oak located in the rear yard of the neighboring property, which was not referenced within the originally submitted tree management plan. Based on the overall results of this review, staff recommend that the subject upland site design application be approved, subject to the applicant submitting a revised tree management plan, which includes measures to protect Gary Oak number 217 and identifies and includes measures to protect the pin oak located in the northeast corner of the rear yard of 3245 Ripon Road. I should note that the applicant also recently submitted the requested information. However, staff have yet had the opportunity to review it in advance of this meeting, but that will likely take place in the coming days. Staff are requesting council direction on this application, and the applicant and builder, Martin Schenk, the project designer, Will Peerboom, and the project arborist, Julian Dunster, are all in attendance tonight, along with myself and Chris Hadley from staff to answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber, for that great overview. Are there questions from members of council to staff or the applicant? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much. And I think my question is probably going to be to Mr. Hyde-Lay, because it's in regards to the trees. In the report, it does say that that staff say that the health and size of some of those trees is such that it's approving the removal of them. Can you tell me, out of the 19 trees that are being removed, What's the number of those trees that you would think should be removed because of the health of the trees as it stands right now?
Mr. Heidley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Councillor Braithwaite. I'll first just comment on the trees in general. So, although it does sound like a lot of trees are to be removed on this particular property, as Kevin referenced, many are in poor health. Many are also on the CRD priority invasive list, the hollies and the Portuguese laurel, etc. Looking at the project long term, I would consider that as far as a mature canopy cover goes for the uplands, we'll be ahead of the game. But to answer your question directly, I would say that 3 or 4 of the trees that are going to be removed are just because of the nature of the construction on the property, could fall into that category. But I will reference that one of them, the Lawson cypress, just to the immediate right of the property, which appears to be quite a nice tree, is essentially suppressing 2 Gary oaks. The grove of coast redwood trees at the rear, there's 3 there. Those trees are very long-lived. 2 will be impacted by the actual pool deck. But the one that will be retained will eventually be able to grow to maturity. And as mentioned, we expect it to have a long life. One of the Gary oaks on the driveway certainly could be retained. And that would be the extent of the trees. So I'd say about 4, but most of them are in fair to poor, some very poor, and some certainly on the invasive plant list.
Thank you, Mr. Heidley. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Heidley. That actually makes me feel a lot better, because when I initially read this and saw that 19 of 27 trees were going to be removed, to reduce it from 62% to 47% of canopy coverage, I have to admit my heart skipped a beat. I will ask one question in regards to the tree number 217. I do see it in the, I'm assuming that's a driveway in front of the house, or it's right beside a driveway or some paving in front of the house. So do you feel, with the closeness of that paved area to tree 217, that tree 217, wow, say that 3 times fast, tree 217 will be able to survive, or should that be moved a little bit away from the roots of that tree?
I feel that the recommendations through Dr. Dunster, Julian, what's proposed, it will be successfully retained.
Thank you. And my last question, I think, would be to Mr. Rennick. And Mr. Rennick, I know that in the report it says that the ADP denied this application when it went through on March 1st, but then a few changes were made, and then staff elected to move it forward. So is this a normal process if something happens, if something gets denied through ADP, and there are a couple of changes, that it doesn't go back to ADP? I'm just wondering on the process.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Weber.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. The applicants basically have 2 options if they get denied at, or I guess potentially 3 if they get denied at ADP or APC. Certainly, they are welcome to proceed directly through to council with the recommendation that their application be denied. But of course, this is a bit of a riskier option, as obviously it's not looked on very favorably by council. Another option would be for them to revise their application and return to ADP and try to strive to achieve a recommendation that it be approved, which would likely bode better for the application, but of course would extend the approvals timeline. And then I guess, of course, the alternate option is that they just don't proceed with the application. My understanding is the applicant was hoping to get their hoping to expedite the approvals process. So instead of returning back to ADP, they elected to go straight to council, but the applicant is welcome to speak to that himself if he wishes.
You're good? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. On the staff report, it does say that following the ADP meeting, that changes were made, and one of the comments is that portions of the proposed driveway in the front yard of the subject property were narrowed. Do we have any understanding of the amount of area proportionately that was narrowed as to what the proportion was when the ADP saw it?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Weber, do we have any specifics on that? And if not, I might go to the applicant.
Yes, thank you. And through you, it may be best to go to the applicant. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. Certainly the original plans are in the ADP agenda that went forward on March 1st, so it can kind of be roughly assessed by looking at those plans, but I'll leave it to the applicant in case he's able to provide those exact numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Schenk, welcome back. Welcome to the meeting more officially.
Yeah, good day, Mayor and Council, members of staff. I'm here to represent the upcoming project at 3275 Ripon Road and the new construction of a home, which fits in within the existing building site. We did make all changes requested to meet within the guidelines and bylaws of Oak Bay. We did retain that tree 217, which was a big request of the oak tree at the front in the driveway. And we went from pavement to permeable pavers throughout the whole driveway, also narrowing up the hardscape as well. So, and then under Julian's supervision, we're actually going to float the pavers over the root system of tree 217, and Julian will supervise the installation of those pavers, those permeable pavers, and so we can keep that tree and keep it healthy. That's the whole point of that one. And then we've removed the copper from the roof. We've added a rain garden in the back, and reduced the overall hardscape both at the back and front yard down to 10% in the back and 18% in the front. So we're well within all the guidelines, and we feel confident that you would be happy with our plans that we've resubmitted.
Thank you, Mr. Schenk. Do you have any specifics in terms of the reduction in width of the sidewalk or the driveway? Do you know that answer?
I think the reduction of the width of the driveway is about 2 feet. And perhaps Matt Kaisers from Victoria Design Group could answer this question as well. I'm working with Matt Kaisers and Will Peerboom from Victoria Design Group, as well as Aaron Rennick from Green Space Designs on the landscape design. And of course, our arborist, Julian, who's been overseeing the whole job. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Kaisers, do you have the specifics of the sidewalk or the driveway narrowing?
Yes, the driveway narrowed by about 1.5 meters.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that answer. Are there any other questions of the applicant? Any other questions of the applicant or staff? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite for a second time. And sorry, Councillor Zelka for the first time, and then I'll go back to Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to possibly the proponent. I'm very, very pleased to see the rain garden. The first question, possibly to staff or to the proponent, the rain garden is to, I presume, slow down the flow of water off the property, presumably into the stormwater runoff, which of course in that area it's a single pipe system. Storm and sewerage are all in the same pipe. So just wanted to confirm that that the water for the entire property is going through the rain garden, and I presume from the roof as well. I just wanted to know, first of all, thank you for slowing down the flow into that pipe, and to what extent is the rain garden being used?
Thank you, Councillor Zalka. The rain garden is presumably for the house, Mr. Schenk, is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Perhaps you could just explain what runoff goes into the rain garden in this
Yes, so
design.
it'll be the rainwater leaders from the roof, as well as the perimeter drains will run through the rain garden to absorb as much water as it can take before it goes out to the storm system.
Excellent. That's all I wanted to confirm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zalka. Then back to you, Councillor Braithwaite, for a second time.
Thank you. I just was looking on page 19 of the staff report at the document that's called Tree Plan and Canopy Calculation or Calculator. And I just noticed that it was updated in March and it still shows the Gary Oak number 217 to be removed. So I just want to ensure that that is not what's happening, because once we approve what's in the package, is that not what gets approved, or is it what's written? Because this looks like it was revised on March 18th, 2022, and it still shows tree 217 to be removed.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I note that the recommendation is to subject to a revised tree management plan, so perhaps Mr. Weber, perhaps you can just confirm that wording that's in the suggested motion would ensure that that is incorporated and we're not bound by the drawing that remains in this package.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, you are correct. The recommendation is for that council approve the subject application on essentially the condition that the applicant submit a revised plan that shows the Gary Oak tree number 217 being protected, along with a tree management plan that identifies the pin oak in the neighboring garden, includes measures to protect it. So I guess in that sense, council wouldn't be approving the plans as they're shown to council tonight. It's more so approving the recommendation that the application be approved subject to those recommendations. And as I mentioned before, the applicant has already submitted a revised tree management plan, as well as application drawings which show that tree being protected. And staff just have yet to review that to ensure that it's, I guess, our concerns are being adequately addressed. Thank you.
Mr. Weber. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I do know in the past we've had occasion where the wrong plans were used, and so something had to come back to council for something. So I'm hoping that the correct plans will be the ones that are that will be used for this particular item. Thanks.
We have submitted the most recent plans last week. So maybe you were looking at a previous plan, but the latest plan that was submitted actually shows retaining tree 217, and it actually shows the permeable pavers. There's a note right on the plan showing the permeable pavers being carried over the root system. And maybe Julian wants to address this. Julian, can you, or?
No, I think staff already had said that they've received those. They just did not have a chance to review them prior to this meeting.
I
hence,
see.
Hence the recommendation to approve it subject
and it does show it.
Thank you,
clearly
Mr.
on the
Schenk.
plan.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Don't see any other questions sitting here. May I get a motion? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Motion to receive the staff report.
Moved in second. Moved for receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed.
And Your Worship, I would move that Upland Siting and Design Application ADP 00143 be approved subject to a revised tree management plan being submitted to the satisfaction of the Manager of Park Services.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on this matter? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you to the applicant for coming tonight and to staff for their report and answering all the questions. And good luck with the project.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
And we are moving on to item number 11. We are back into public, making sure I'm not missing anything. Item number 11, which is bylaws and permits. These are subject to public input. So if anybody wishes to speak to item 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, or 11.4, and you haven't called into the 1855 number, I would encourage you to do so at this time. As we bring these things to discussion, I will ask people to hit *9 to raise your hand. Again, that's *9, not #9, to raise your hand. If you're in the Zoom app, you can, of course, raise your hand within the application itself. So moving to item number 11.1, we have a driveway access amendment bylaw Mr. Rennick, Manager of Engineering Services, perhaps you could give us a quick overview.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. How's my volume?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. Tonight, I will be speaking to you about amendments to the driveway access bylaw, primarily to vary the requirements for bareland strata developments. The driveway access bylaw sets out the standards for driveway crossings to all parcels within the district. If a parcel is not zoned for single family, so that's all zones except RS1 through RS5, then any parcel can have a minimum of a 3-meter wide driveway and a maximum of a 6-meter wide driveway. With single family zoned parcels, and that would include bareland stratas, their maximum driveway width is based on how much frontage they have, and the parcel would need to have at least 26 meters of frontage in order to qualify for a 6-meter wide driveway. Now, this policy is generally consistent with the zoning bylaw, which limits the impervious surface in the front yard of a single-family home to 25%, but it does cause a bit of an issue for bareland strata developments. There are parcels in Oak Bay that are large enough to support multiple homes on one parcel in a bareland strata development without requiring a zoning bylaw amendment, but they don't necessarily have adequate frontage to qualify for a 6-meter wide driveway. So when you have multiple homes in a single development, you could have 4 or 5. We even have a handful in Oak Bay that have 8 or 9 houses, all accessing a public road using a single access route. It's preferable to have that be 6 meters wide because that allows two-way traffic on and off of the parcel. The bylaw amendment that staff's proposing would allow a bareland strata development to have a driveway that's the same width as the strata access on their property, up to a maximum of 6 meters. This would bring our standards for bareland strata driveways more in line with our requirements for multifamily zones. And that's consistent with the fact that a bareland strata is multiple residences with a single access. And then aside from the changes for the bareland strata, there's also a minor housekeeping amendment around the width of footpaths over the municipal boulevard, just cleaning up a motion that was made the last time that this bylaw was amended. And at this point, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick. Are there any questions of staff on this matter? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson, then Appleton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Rennick. Thank you for the report, Mr. Rennick. Could you just advise what responsibility, if any, a developer of a strata has in installing signage for the access roads? Because I noticed in Oak Bay, a lot of them don't have anything about watching for pedestrian crossing or whatnot. So although I notice in the report, it does say, give an example of Fair Street, where the drive into the strata is a different surfacing than the sidewalk. So it says this indicates that pedestrians have priority, but I haven't always found that in that location, in fact. And I think signage to remind drivers to actually watch for pedestrians is something that's utilized in other communities. Is there any regulatory framework here that would require that?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Rennick.
Through you, Mayor, to Council, this bylaw is primarily just around sort of the width of an access, anything that has to do with signage or asking folks to come to a stop. That's not really within the scope of this bylaw, but that is certainly something that staff can discuss with applicants when one of these projects comes to the table.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, that's all.
I have Councillor Appleton, then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Worship. I think actually, and through you to staff, I think actually what's most significant in this for me is standardizing, or at least when such things are created, to create an improvement on the sidewalk and in the street realm just for pedestrians, and mentioning in the proposed amendments that that having the sidewalk carry through the access route is desirable. And I just wanted to ask the question: is that the typical standard when a servicing agreement's laid out for a new subdivision? Is that the current district standard? Is the expectation is that the sidewalk will be set up in that flush manner to carry all the way through and sort of enhance that enhance that access?
Mr. Rennick?
Through you, Mayor, yes, that is the standard. I caveat that with when there is a sidewalk. There was a recent Bearland Strata development built on King George Terrace near the lookout, and that was the requirement that the sidewalk carries through the driveway, and it's been done recently. Fair Street in the report is another example of what we like to see, where the sidewalk keeps going.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to reference photo 3, Fair Street Strata driveway, and just ask the question. It suggests that this treatment with this sidewalk passing all the way through is some indication that the pedestrians have priority. However, the fact that the sidewalk dips down tells me that the pedestrians really don't have priority. What I've seen utilized in other areas, more so in Europe maybe than here in North America, is the pavement. That's right. Excuse me, the sidewalk continuing level, and then essentially there's a small ramp which acts effectively as a speed bump to any car entering or trying to cross this driveway. Excuse me, this sidewalk, and that makes it abundantly clear that the pedestrians absolutely have priority, in that the car must slow down. So could you possibly share maybe your perspective, or maybe what you may have seen with respect to sidewalks that would be level, even with the driveway across?
Mr. Rennick?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Council, there is a construction document and standard specification set that's used by municipal engineers in British Columbia. It's referred to as the Master Municipal Construction Document, or the MMCD. And that tends to be the guiding specification that we use sort of unofficially, although it's possible that later in the future, we will be bringing bylaw amendments to the subdivision bylaw that formally recognize that we use the Master Municipal Construction Document as our specification. Sorry, that's a lot to say several times fast. And this standard of driveway crossings, such as the one that's being used at Fair Street, is the same one that comes from that document. So it's not necessarily that it's an Oak Bay choice, more that it's a provincial standard.
If I may continue with a follow-up.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I happen to be reading a book right now called Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. Fascinating book that talks about all of the road standards, in particular in North America, that often stretch all the way back to the 1950s. And I believe the standard that you referenced is one of those that is well rooted in the car-centric road aspect. I completely understand that there's a desire to stay with standards as they are, but I do also recognize that with respect to active transportation, these standards are and must change. I don't know what process we would follow, but I ask if there's any way that in the next version of this, at the very least, that we try to see if there's ways of making it even more abundantly clear to car drivers that pedestrians must and always have priority.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'll take it as a comment, but I might just ask Mr. Rennick as an order of how this is managed within engineering. I know there's regular reviews of these standards. I'm curious, is there any mechanism by which Oak Bay participates in the setting of those standards or the recommendations back? Because obviously multiple municipalities are working for active transportation goals. Oh, I should go to Mr. Haran. I'll turn that question to Mr. Haran if you wish.
I'd be happy to answer that question, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Haran can jump in if there's anything that I missed. So I did mention that we will be looking to formalize that the MNCD standard is Oak Bay's standard specification set. However, many municipalities in British Columbia have their own supplemental specifications. In particular, District of Saanich has their own addendum to their development bylaw that will basically say, we follow MNCD except for this particular thing. We have a custom that we like to see in Saanich. And so If Oak Bay were to bring changes to our specifications, it would come in the form of a bylaw amendment. And as it would be a bylaw amendment, that would be a process subject both to council and public input.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Zelka, any follow-up?
Just to say thank you for offering a suggested approach. And I don't know whether it would be notice of motion or whether there would be some way that we could possibly find a way to present ideas, whether it's from Salish or from other of the local authorities in the area, to find ways to continue to make it more and more safe for our pedestrians and of course for the road users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't see other hands popped up here. I don't see any indications from the public they wish to address us on this matter. So perhaps I'll come back to the members here. Certainly need a motion to receive to begin. Moved and seconded for receipt. Any discussion on the receipt? Don't see any. All those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? So this is the first, second, and third. Do we do first and second reading? Let's do first and second reading, and then
I'll move first and second reading.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. This is a point for any discussion or debate on these changes. Don't see. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you again very much. With respect to the potential addendum, as mentioned by the staff, I guess would the appropriate a way of seeking a way of finding an addendum to add to the MMCD standards for a more made in Oak Bay, or at least made on Vancouver Island type solution to many of these solutions. Would it be appropriate for a notice of motion, or would there be some other way that would be recommended by staff to proceed?
Thank you. So procedurally, no, we won't take notice as a motion in the middle of consideration of another motion, but I'm happy to take a question from.
It's a question.
To Mr. Haran on that particular matter, in terms of that timeline that's expected currently, and if how council might consider input into that. Mr. Haran, welcome back to the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just when we are talking about the standards, like this is a bylaw that's related to driveway access. When it comes to specifications and standards and guidance approved by council for pedestrian safety, there's a number of issues and concerns and guidance already given, which is much larger than this question of the master municipal construction documents. The thing is, I think a lot of the questions and the design treatments that can be done to calm drivers, calm speeds, encourage pedestrians to feel safer in the public realm are already things that council has given direction to staff on. So I feel quite encouraged in the district of Oak Bay around the guidance about what the aims are. The focus in Oak Bay is definitely, maybe not always, but definitely now, on people on foot. Next level up is people on self-propelled wheels, and then the lowest priority is cars. And council has already given that direction to staff. So I think this discussion of trying to, right now, make changes to something as significant as the master municipal construction documents. These aren't Bibles that our engineering staff use as they must follow them. It's guidance, and we use our professional judgment. Whether it's our own staff or whether consultants that are working on our behalf, we direct them to use the professional guidance to embody council's direction on what the priorities are on the roads and the streets in our neighborhoods to keep people safe. So I think at this time, we can certainly have a further discussion about what those standards are. But when it comes to this particular bylaw, I think that this is a discussion that probably merits a separate discussion as opposed to the bylaw that's being considered at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haran.
Final comments, if I may, please.
Please go ahead.
And thank you very much, and thank you through you to staff. I absolutely, I totally concur. I certainly wouldn't want to edit by committee standards, but I just was looking for some possible direction on how we could make changes, maybe at a later version of this particular bylaw. I will be voting in favor of this particular bylaw to move forward, and I do also want to take a moment to say thank you. In some ways, this helps to facilitate some of the infill work that potentially will be looked at going forward. If we can, most likely there may be Bearland stratas going forward, more of them with respect to infill, and this certainly will help facilitate a two-way driveway access to some aspects of those upcoming changes. So thank you again for your forward-looking aspects, staff, through you, Chair, to staff, and I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion? We're on first and second reading of the changes. Don't see any. I'll call a question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? Then get third reading.
Move third reading.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Don't usually have additional discussion on third reading, but I will take hands popping up if there's a last minute thought. Don't see any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Again, I'm moving on to 11.2. We are going to Parks, Recs, and Culture fees and charges. If anybody from the public wishes to address us, I hope you've called into the 1855 number. Please hit *9 at this time to indicate you wish to speak to us. I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Herman, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, just to give a quick overview of the proposed changes.
Thank you, Your Worship. In 2021, Council adopted the first Parks, Recreation, and Culture fees and charges bylaw following the dissolution of the Commission. So the bylaw amendment that's before you tonight really is to update the fees that are listed in Schedule 1. Those fees, the new fees would be required be approved in order to meet the revenue targets that are embedded in the financial plan. Which another way of saying that is that these are the fees that staff use to generate revenue projections for 2022. So there's nothing unusual in those fee changes. That the admission fees and pass fees are staying the same. And our rental fees are seeing their normal 2% increase, which is consistent with the collective agreement increases and up until recently, inflation. And then one minor change in the body of the document in section 2.3, the original language stated that children aged 5 and under have free admission to aquatic and arena facilities. The proposed new wording would state children aged 5 and under have free admission to aquatic and arena drop-in sessions. May seem like a minor change, but the original language could be interpreted to suggest that those children would get free access to swimming and skating lessons, and that certainly has never historically been the case. And was not the intent, and certainly would have budgetary impact if we went that direction. So this proposed language is a little bit more specific and makes that interpretation easier. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Herman. I often get asked questions around the film production fees when people see the trucks on the streets in our community. And according to this schedule, what I'm looking for is just if you could help me understand the sort of average amount that that a production company might be getting charged. I noticed there's an application permit fee, obviously. There's a municipal street use of $153. And then there is some addendum stuff. I'm wondering, is that really the amount that a crew would be paying? And like, is there a daily fee, or are there just these one-time fees? I was just trying to get a general sense of the total amount that a production crew would be charged by the municipality. Say they were on a street for a week or two? Or is it all here in this schedule here?
Mr. Herman?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's difficult to say that there's an average because we have very small productions and we have larger productions. So those fees apply accordingly. So a small production would pay certainly much less than some of the larger ones, which would pay tens of thousands of dollars sometimes by the time they're done. So I do know that Mr. Meikle has ongoing discussions both with the Greater Victoria Film Commission and our neighboring municipalities to ensure that what we are charging is within the general norm across the region. We don't want to be overpriced nor underpriced. And I think he's found in those discussions that that's right where we sit. I think we're very similar to City of Victoria rates. So I don't know that I'm specifically answering the question, but the rates are laid out there. That's what is charged, and we, depending on the year, if we have a lot of film production, we've seen fairly substantial revenue over the course of a year come in based on those rates.
Okay, thank you. That really was the second part. I was just wondering how much in line we are with other municipalities, and you've answered that. Thank you. And the only other fee in the schedule, I was wondering why it wouldn't be included, and that is the fee that individuals who are disadvantaged, they get a special rate. Mr. Herman, would there be a reason that wouldn't be included in this schedule?
Mr. Herman?
We have some other options for folks if they're financially disadvantaged. We have a life program that's been around for many years, and that's a regional initiative. All the municipalities or all the departments in the region participate in that, where folks who have financial constraints can get free access to facilities and reduced program fees for lessons and things like that. So we certainly have those options available, and they don't fall within this bylaw. We also, if, for instance, for folks who have physical constraints and perhaps need somebody to come with them to help them participate, the buddy, for lack of a better phrase, is not charged. So there is an effort to ensure that that's affordable for folks as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Are there any other questions for Mr. Herman? I have one quick question, and that is just in the Henderson and Monterey rentals, the Gary Oak rooms and the Douglas Fir rooms with catering is cheaper than without cheaper than without catering. So I'm just curious if is that correct? And I can think of a couple of reasons why it would be correct, but I just want to make sure that it is in that correct order.
Thank you, Your Worship. Absolutely, that is correct, and it's typical in the catering and event industry that you would do that because you make money off of the food sales.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I don't see any other questions. Can I have a motion to receive first?
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the receipt? Don't see any. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Before I go to a motion on the main part, I'm just going to double check. I don't see anybody online who's indicated they wish to speak. Just going to double check. No, confirmed. So back to this table.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, so
actually, I'll move first and second reading.
Thank you. Moved and seconded for first and second reading. Any other discussion? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? And looking for third reading?
Move third reading.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much for that. We have now on to 11.3. Once again, if anybody from the public wishes to address council on, I would take, frankly, calls on either 11.3 or 11.4 in terms of the tax rates bylaw or the for the financial plan bylaw. I think they're so closely related. I'd be happy to take public input on either of those if anybody wishes to address. If you haven't yet, please call in 1-855 number and hit the meeting and ID and passcode that are shown on the screen, and then hit *9 to raise your hand. Thank you very much for that. So up first, Mr. Payne, we have the tax rates bylaw for 2022.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have prepared the 2022 tax rate bylaws in consideration of the 5-year financial plan revenues. The tax increase is a 5.5% tax increase, which is just slightly above what was mentioned during budget deliberations of a 5.4% tax increase. And that's just because our new construction property tax revenue estimates came in a little bit lower than what we had expected. $128,000 versus $150,000. So it's just a slight adjustment to the tax rates. So we've prepared the tax rates per the community charter. The tax rate bylaw and the financial plan bylaw have to be adopted before May 14th. So we're a bit ahead of schedule, but we need two meetings to adopt those bylaws. The average tax increase to the median residential property is approximately $176. And the one other item of interest in the report is the increase to the farm tax rate. The district has a stated policy in its financial plan bylaw to charge a tax rate on the farm class that would be equivalent to what the tax yield would be if the property were residential. So essentially, the policy tries to achieve the same level of taxation for residential properties versus the farm class properties. So the farm rate has fallen a little bit out of lockstep with that policy, given the fast increases in the residential assessments. So we're proposing to bring that back into alignment, and that would require a 10% increase, over a 10% increase to the tax rate for the farm class this year compared to previous years. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Payne, thank you very much for the report. And I did note the farm class issue. Just wondering, are there any properties classified as farms in Oak Bay? I'd be surprised. Oh, there is one. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Payne, I believe there is just the one property, is it not?
Correct.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Payne on this? Councillor Patterson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And not so much a question on this, but I have raised it before, and so I will raise it once again. With the tax rate bylaw, it's really important, I think, to tie the tax rate bylaws and the financial plan. Well, the financial plan, the bylaw, the sustainable infrastructure replacement plan, and the asset management implementation plan altogether. So we're still waiting for a couple of portions of that to come forward so that we can we have better understanding of how we are going to do both on the 5-year plan and then on the longer term plan. So I know we were supposed to get it at the end of the first quarter, and it has been delayed, and hopefully we will be seeing that very soon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Payne, do you wish to just address that, the comment around the cumulative total of all of those various plans and bylaws?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And do correct me if I'm wrong, through you to Councillor Patterson, but I believe what's being referenced here is staff's plan to scale up capital expenditure output in accordance with the recommendations in the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan. In terms of the tie-in between all three of those products, I would say we've certainly grown in alignment over the last couple of years. The Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan was prepared in fall of last year, and the implications of those were articulated in the financial plan bylaw, and capital spending was increased to reflect some of that. However, there is more scale up that's required, and staff is preparing that information for council to consider further scaling up. So yes, I do believe there will be more harmonization to be had, and the council will see evidence of that in the near future.
Thank you for that, Mr. Payne. I don't see other questions. I'm just going to make sure we don't have any members of the public who have called in to address us on this matter. I don't see any on my end. I'm getting confirmation from staff. Thank you very much. So can we get moved for seat
Move for
first?
seat.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? And then
Move first and second reading.
move for second reading. And this is tax bylaw number 2022 number 4812. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Then third reading.
Move third reading of tax rates bylaw 2022 number 4812.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? We don't usually have third, but I'll take it. None. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That'll come back for adoption at the next meeting. Number 11.4, financial plan bylaw. I've already provided opportunity for the public to call, but if you wish to add anything, by all means, call the 1855 number that's on the screen, the meeting ID, the passcode, and then *9 to raise your hand within the app. I appreciate, I'll go back to Mr. Payne here for for a quick overview of the financial plan bylaw.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As mentioned before, this is also another bylaw that's required to be adopted before May 15th if council wants it to be effective. Essentially, it's the legal articulation of the financial plan deliberations that we underwent. So the differences between what you see here in the financial plan bylaw versus the financial plan document are really three main things. First of all, it's the level of detail. So this bylaw is prepared at a very high level so that we have maximum operational and spending ability without the risk of exceeding our expenditure authorities. So it doesn't provide a lot of transparency, but that's what the financial plan document provides for us, is a deep level of transparency. And we do our quarterly budget reporting based on that level of detail to maintain that transparency. Second of all, we include something called amortization, which is a non-cash expense. It's basically the economic cost of our assets wearing out over time. So we quantify what that historical cost of amortization is. And the reason for that is because it aligns well with our year-end financial reporting. Public sector accounting standards require the inclusion of amortization at the end of the year. So we include it in the budget so council and the public's able to compare apples to apples. And then lastly, also we have the COVID-19 restart grant. In the financial plan document, we refer to that as a grant. However, it was recognized as a grant in the year which was received. So it's really a transfer from a reserve in our financial plan bylaw. So it's just stated a little bit differently there. That would conclude my brief presentation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I believe this is procedural in nature, but earlier on this agenda, we had passed a motion with respect to the rec center roof, saying that the Director of Financial Services would amend the financial plan as required, given that decision. So just from a procedural perspective, this is here for first, second, and third readings, so I'm just wondering, would it be more appropriate to give it first and second readings and then have a revision come back from staff if it's required, or can we receive amended documents after third reading?
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. And really an excellent question, which demonstrates the value of having a financial plan bylaw that's summarized on a very high level. And the motion that Council endorsed today in respect of the roof directed me to amend the financial plan bylaw if necessary. And that resolution wording was deliberate. Overall, the financial plan bylaw approves capital spending to the tune of $18.9 million. So it's unlikely we'll exceed that amount of capital spending this year, even with the overage in the budget, so it probably won't be likely needed that we'll need to amend the financial plan bylaw because of that high level that has been summarized. And the other item in the financial plan would be that we can't exceed would be our transfer from reserve, transfer from our infrastructure renewal reserve. So if I forecast that either of those items will be exceeded within the year, it's necessary for me to come back with a financial plan bylaw amendment. So sorry to answer succinctly, I don't think it's necessary to make any changes to the bylaw at this point, and it will certainly be reassessed at quarter 2 and quarter 3.
Thank you for that, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to our Director of Finances. Thank you for the reporting on how we will assess the financial plan going forward. Also, if Mr. Payne could just confirm that we do, as council, also look at the Q2 and Q3 budget reforecasts when they come out. So at that point in time, should council choose, we could make decisions about allocations or reallocations of funding, and rather than just relying on accessing the reserves fund. Is that correct?
Mr. Payne?
Through your worship, that's absolutely correct. At quarter 2 and quarter 3, we'll prepare full year forecasts for spending, and if there's a budgetary surplus that we identify as potentially happening, council has the authority to direct the use of that surplus, and certainly that surplus could be used to fund the overage in this capital expenditure line item or many other uses as well.
Thank you very much. Any other questions of Mr. Payne at this point? I'll go out to the public as well, like one last time, just to check. I see nothing on my screen, nothing confirmed by staff. Thank you. Just one quick question and something you touched on, Mr. Payne, was the nature of the slight deviation in format of reporting between the bylaw and the financial plan. And I appreciate it's being done for clarity because one's a more readable document, but is there any value in looking at aligning those a bit closer and just with a note to one of the two documents so that going from one to the other, because we seem to always get 1 or 2 emails every year where someone catches such a thing and we have to go through the explanation process. And I just wonder if there's any value in that or if it's just so minor that it doesn't make any difference in your mind. Mr. Payne?
Your worship, yes, I believe there absolutely is value. And if you were to ask me if I've considered creating that value, I would say, yes, there's some excellent examples in the region of doing exactly that. I would point to View Royal, who's developed an online budget system where folks can go in at any time and drill down into the budget. So for instance, in this case, we have general municipal in the bylaw, which is $28 million. It's nice to have that on a high level for maximum operational spending ability, but should the public want to know what makes up that amount, it would be nice for them to be able to drill down and see that alignment with the financial plan document. View Royal's been able to do that, so I commend my colleague over there, and I would love to see that as well at some point.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Payne, for that information. I don't see other hands up, so can I get a motion to receive the report? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And then I need first and second reading.
Move first and second reading
Moved
of
and
the
seconded.
financial plan bylaw for 8/81/2022.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Shouldn't have cut you off there. Any discussion? Do not see any. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed.
And move third reading.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Again, don't usually have discussion. Looking around, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. There's no new business been flagged for me. Any new business before we get to adjournment? Then I just need a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. I should have had just over 2 hours since we started late. Have a great evening, everyone, and we'll see you all very soon. Take care. Have a great night, and thank you all who are watching and who participated this evening.